Let's talk to licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Shannan Crawford.
Raised in California, college in Virginia Beach, Virginia. You got the intern in Hawaii.
Conference speaker, an adjunct professor, podcast host, and innovator expert in restoring self-cohesion.
When you can get somebody's amygdala, that's the fire alarm, and you get fear and aggression, you get people angry and you get them scared, they will be committed. They will watch that. It happened to me just the other day. I was on Instagram and I saw this video and it was like I was sucked in. But it's two girls in high school, like a high school bathroom. And so they're just having conversation. All of a sudden you hear shooting outside the high school bathroom. And again, this is not news, but I'm like watching it. And so now this young African-American student comes in and he's covered in blood and they're all hiding and you can tell people are dying outside that door. And I'm watching that and I can feel my heart racing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just allowed myself to be vicariously traumatized and now feel powerless and there's nothing I can do, but yet it's selling as entertainment.
There's a certain time where you said, then I started experiencing depression, self-harm, self-esteem issues, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix it. My original joy, creativity, boldness, and hope were replaced by heavy depression, insecurity, self-hatred, and self-sabotage. How did you overcome that?
So
57% is the percentage of Americans with a mental illness who don't receive treatment. 300 million people are the number of people affected by depression. Since COVID, doctors are twice as likely to die by suicide. So, what's your take on this? What's happening?
Hey guys, this is Shannan with Empower You. I wanted to shoot this video really quick before we launch the episode with you guys. We have an amazing friend, Dr. Shannan Crawford. She's a leadership performance psychologist, and she's going to be talking about a very sensitive topic. What you guys need to know, this is only her opinion. This is not clinical advice. And most importantly, if you're struggling with anything around depression, anxiety, suicide, man, if we could be a resource to you, reach out to us. We're also going to put her clinic in the description. But man, share this out with people. We think it's going to impact a lot of people's lives, touch a lot of people's lives. So thank you so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, thank you so much for making it to the latest episode of Empowering You. This whole entire podcast is about helping you become the best version of yourself. And today we have an amazing guest, an industry expert, Dr. Crawford. Thank you for being here.
it's my privilege.
Dr. Crawford is a leadership performance psychologist. There's so much we want to get into with you. Figured the way we'd start this is just to let you guys know a little bit about why we're doing this topic around mental health. I mean, Sam and I, we've had our company for about 10 years, and I would probably say over the last 5 years, it's just emerged more than ever before. And I know you're going to say it's been around way longer than that. But for us, it's something that's really emerged a lot more. And not only like in our employees, but even in my personal life, in my journey as an entrepreneur and having to face the pressures of entrepreneurship. And it's brought up a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You know, what's your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I think same thing. You know, it's something like we talked about even before, that it's just something that growing up in an immigrant family, I never even knew mental health things were a problem. Yeah. But we're seeing it in our employees. We're experiencing it. So I think it'd be just a great topic. And so thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
So I did some research, and there's a website called Project Hope that I just grabbed, and the purpose was like, what's the global health mental crisis right now, and just kind of where we at, what does it look like? So I just want to read some of these stats, and then we can, if you just give us some input, that'd be great. But here they are: 25% of the global population suffers from mental illness. 2/3 of people with mental health conditions don't receive the care they need. People with serious mental health illness are twice as likely to develop cardiovascular and metabolic disease, which that one was interesting to me. 300 million people are the number of people affected by depression. That's, I mean, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Since COVID, doctors are twice as likely to die by suicide. 31% is the percentage of Americans seeking mental health treatment who worry about what others will think. I was probably one of those guys. 20%, the percentage of the world's children and adolescents with a mental health condition. and again, I'm saying this to all of them, but this one, I didn't even know kids could have mental health issues. I mean, you got teenagers and things, but I don't consider them kids, but they're talking like children. So 16 trillion, the global cost of mental health disorders by 2030, $16 trillion.
16 trillion. Oh my God.
So it's just getting worse and worse. 57% is the percentage of Americans with a mental illness who don't receive treatment.
Yeah.
So what's your take on this? What's happening? If you could just give us like your idea on the global health crisis and what's happening today, just those things.
Yeah. And even the most recent statistic I looked at, that business owners, the cost of mental health is now superseding the cost of physical health like cancer and diabetes on your insurance claims. Mental health is now superseding that. And that's unheard of. That's unparalleled.
Yeah.
Because physical health, we know how expensive that is. And now businesses are really having to restructure and create added benefits and resources and HR package to really help support their team, because it is a global pandemic of mental health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're right on. I mean, Shadi and I could speak from experience. We're having to do that right now.
Right.
We actually have shopped mental health platforms specifically for the needs in our company. A lot of these plans now also have these people you could contact to just talk to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's become such a big deal. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Man,
What's your take, Dr. Crawford, on, and just speaking of the global health crisis, this is, social media, like I feel like just opinion-wise.
Sure.
And I just love to know your take on it. But social media feels like that's just adding to it. I equate like celebrities who back in the day were just on movies and things like that. They would get criticism, and that's why I think you would see a lot of mental health issues in that kind of area. But now, that type of criticism is open to anyone. I mean, is that kind of what you're seeing today? And kind of like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just a small illustration, amount of kids we're seeing that are being blackmailed. So with social media, you have all these different platforms that you can ask for a nude picture.
Yeah.
And so they send it because kids want attention, they want validation and relationship. And then that person, whether it's Snapchat or any other platform, they might take a snapshot of that. And now they can say, if you don't between classes today, if you don't do this, I'm going to release it to everyone. So that's taking bullying to another level.
it's like a ransomware. I mean, literally in the IT world.
Yeah,
it's like
it
a
is
ransomware
absolutely.
attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So there's those levels of like extreme bullying and blackmail. And then there's just the comparison. I think the Social Dilemma film was brilliant in helping
that's
us
right.
capture how much psychologically we're being impacted by this. And then there's just the scrolling and the endless dopamine release that you're not actually getting an end result at the end. So what it does is it uses up your good chemicals, and you feel like you just got a bunch of pleasure and high because you saw your likes and you saw the newest news, but yet you don't have substance at the end of it. So think of it like eating cotton candy, where you're like, oh, that was wonderful, but it's empty, it's hollow, it doesn't actually give protein or substance. So then by contrast, I look back at my normal life and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of lackluster, I'm kind of a loser. I don't have anything going on in my life, even though it's all Instagram filtered and it's not real, right? But then we create that unconscious bias that that's better than my life.
Right.
And so there's a depressive effect that creates.
Oh man, I was just watching, just for reference, I was just watching about some YouTube stars renting these Lamborghinis and all these things like that to like post it on their Facebook or whatever.
This
but
illusion.
It's not really theirs, you know, and that's what everybody's striving for, thinking that,
Yeah.
So anyway,
With your clinics, what are you seeing are some of the greatest mental health challenges coming in through the doors?
Gosh, there's so many. I think if we boil it down, most things are under the umbrella of anxiety, depression, and relationship issues. And so we have lots of different variables, but if we look at it that way, think of mental health kind of like a roller coaster, that all of us want the illusion of control. It's our greatest desire is to feel like I'm in control of my world. And that's why, I don't think it's the only reason, but one of the reasons we saw mental health spike so badly with 2020, because the illusion of control was popped with, oh my gosh, physical health. We could literally die. There's something out there in the world. So there's tons of phobias now regarding health and social shaming and all of these dynamics. And then you also have like the political and the government and the deconstructing. And now we have these waves of social constructs that are just coming in, and you're deconstructing what society has said is normal, which created a psychological frame. And when I have a frame, then I'm like, okay, it's predictable. It may not be right or wrong, but at least there's a sense of like normalcy. But now when I step outside of that and we deconstruct everything, faith, gender, biological, all these things, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's still creating a lot of distress psychologically. So now you have this sense that I need to have like control. I need to have a position. I need to know what I think and believe about this. And I have to stand about this. And you're seeing injustice. So going back to social media and the algorithms of what we're seeing and just constant barrage of negativity.
Right.
And so these compassionate hearts, especially for young people that are like, oh my gosh, I need to help solve this. You keep spiking that adrenal system, which is just like running away from a serial killer every single day. And you can get vicarious trauma just by watching that much negativity around the world that you're powerless to do anything about it. So that's the mirror of how it's similar to having an actual physical trauma happen to you personally versus watching a horrific event somewhere in the world that you don't have influence over. So then you use up all your good chemicals and now you bottom out. And so that's what anxiety and then depression.
Right.
And so now I don't have anything. And I'm like, learned helplessness. What's the point? It's frustrating. I feel empty and useless. And so there's this heaviness and this darkness that can come on people because they get compassion fatigue. We're constantly barraged with negativity because that's what sells.
That's right.
They don't show you all the wonderful aid works and all the social activism that is making a difference. They're not showing you that because clickbait hits the adrenals, right? And so when you can get somebody's amygdala, that's the fire alarm, and you get fear and aggression, you get people angry and you get them scared, they will be committed. They will watch that. It happened to me just the other day. I try not to go on tons of social media, but I was on Instagram and I saw this video and it was like I was sucked in. And it's like a fake video. It's not like a news report, but it's two girls in high school, like a high school bathroom, and they're talking and the girl's like, you're so pretty, you don't even meet, blah, blah. And so they're just having conversation. All of a sudden you hear shooting outside the high school bathroom. And again, this is not news. But I'm like watching it.
Acted out, yeah.
And so now this young African-American student comes in and he's covered in blood and they're all hiding and you can tell people are dying outside that door. And I'm watching that and I can feel my heart racing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just allowed myself to be vicariously traumatized and now feel powerless and there's nothing I can do, but yet it's selling as entertainment.
That's so interesting. Are you saying that even in these videos that are traumatic, we're actually forming traumas in ourselves?
Absolutely.
And these
Mirror
could be
neurons.
even real
Mirror
situations
neurons.
that are happening.
Real. Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
real. I'm saying even they're putting media out there. And if you look at the majority of films that are being released or what's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, they're normally very fear-induced or hypersexual. And so it's activating the brain in these very exaggerated ways that are not hope-feeling. They're not a sense of closure at the end. It's like bad is bad, and you just have to kind of grip your seat through it. Yes, that is going to produce vicarious trauma. Bandura's research on social cognitive modeling, that when you demonstrate something even one time, you've now created a model and a grid that I see that. But also the mirror neurons of when I watch that, it's releasing as if it's happening inside of me. And so the more that I empathize and I feel their pain, the more that my inner world is now releasing those chemicals as if it's happening to me, which is the same as catastrophizing and anxiety, where our brain is forecasting all the bad things that could happen, right? So again, when you deconstruct society and you say all things are on the table to just redefine right now, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't have an opinion. I'm saying psychologically, when you do that, now everything feels like a catastrophe. Everything could be changed. And so the brain has heuristics, mental shortcuts. And that helps the system stay calm and normal and relaxed. But when you deconstruct everything, now the brain is like, well, what am I going to do with this? Well, what if I kill myself? What if I hurt them? What if I'm a bad person? What if I'm capable of doing? And a ton of good people are now living with this hyper anxiety that eventually is going to lead into depressive episodes.
How is that impacting their day-to-day lives?
Well, think of your inner world like a supercomputer.
Right.
right, show. Think of it that you have only so much data, right? And so all of these windows are now focused on, like browser windows, are now focused on all the bad things. And many people are now walking around going, what if I'm capable of doing bad things? What if I'm the next serial killer and horrific and all of the, especially young people are now riddled with anxiety because they're at the window of identity, like, who am I?
That's right.
And so I watched someone else do that, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I could do that? Or it happens to my family and blah, blah, blah. So you have all these browser windows that are using up your data. And then we expect them to go to school and think, or to go to work and actually focus and close that deal or do those numbers or actually go home and be romantic and sweet with their partner or emotionally available for their child.
Right.
We're not compartmentalized. All systems interface inside of us. So the more that my inner world is queued up to danger and threat and catastrophizing the future and trying to protect myself by making sure I don't do something bad and I don't make a bad choice and I don't hurt anyone, all of these threat signals are trumping on the inside the ability to actually use your prefrontal cortex, which is smart brain, that does your work. So when this is hijacking, we are literally less cognitively structured and available. So we're working toward an IRB approval to do research to show that the model that we're working on called restoring self-cohesion, of getting that empirically supported by using cognitive measures. That the more that you restructure and reset the inner world, like defragmenting a computer, the more your cognitive processing or just focus, concentration, memory, recall, all of that is going to improve, is the hypothesis.
So can I break it down real world? Because that was a lot of fancy words in there. So let me just, let me break it down, because I'll give you a real world example, I think.
Sure.
Right? So my son, who is like, you know, I grew up in I would say a technology world, but it was dial-up. So, you know, you watch a picture come across, you got to wait 10 minutes.
Super boring.
He's like, you know, YouTube, bang, let's go. And if it's slow, what the? So we took him off the iPad for like a month, which was really hard, right? But it was also at the same time really good. But I tell you what, like, he seemed like he had more energy. You know, he, like you talk about doing homework. It was easier to sit him down and do homework and tutoring sessions and all those kinds of things. That kind of, I mean, the same concept.
1000%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's even brain research about the brain waves and how it's called neurotheology. It's not faith-based. It's just, that's the field this research is called. And so they're talking about how your brain waves and what you set your day with. So like the first fruits, the first thing you do in the day does start your brain waves. And when we're in beta too much, which is the high kind of bouncy moving around, which they've hired psychologists for Instagram and these different social platforms to try to see how do we keep people engaged, i.e. addicted. And so how do we do that, which keeps an addicted brain? There may not be a substance, but neurochemically, that is affecting focus, concentration, a sense of being present, knowing how to relationally engage with another person. One of my funniest examples is I had a 13-year-old in my office, and we were talking about emotion. All of a sudden, she started duck facing and like posing for Instagram. And I'm like, there's no camera. Like, you're talking to a human. You know, when she would get uncomfortable, she would go back to like her like Instagram persona and didn't actually know how to do relationship and how much that's impacting not only cognitive, but also social development.
Oh, man. So is there any studies, and I don't know if you know this or not, but like long-term effects of this kind of stuff? Is this like something that's reversible, or like what's the real world kind of practicality around these kind of things?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know if there's long-term research. I hope that there is, and there's diligence toward that. The long-term, the good news is the brain, it's called neuroplasticity, that you can reshape and readapt. And so I believe even just starting small practices of starting in the morning with meditation, with a quiet walk, of being still and not checking your phone and your email first thing in the morning, but actually just being present and letting your body organically wake up and your brain be stimulated by the natural environment. And yes, check your email later, check your phone later, but just small practices we can implement that really can make a huge difference.
I could really speak to that. You know, I think about all the things you're talking about, social media and the impact. You know, one of the topics I've studied a lot is the whole cognitive bias side, the side where like these algorithms in YouTube are feeding us what we're liking.
Exactly.
Right, and so we're essentially reinforcing our bias. Essentially, and it's interesting. It's like permeated corporate culture. It's like you have segments of groups that don't want to say anything, people that are really vocal about it. It's just very interesting. It's impacting the culture a lot more.
Yeah.
When I think about like our team, or even when I'm hearing, this idea of anxiety and depression, I know it's happening. It's happening because I've experienced it myself. I could say it, personally in 2018, probably 4 years leading up to that, I started, and this goes back to traumas, because I think what you're talking about, these new traumas like that occur from watching videos. I had to face some of the traumas that I didn't even know were there, right? And I had to okay, how is it influencing me and how I work?
Yeah.
How I get up every day, how I think about myself. And I started realizing that I had like an inner vow where I was just like, I'm going to prove my dad wrong. I'm going to prove this person wrong.
Yeah.
Then I started to see it shape the way I managed my business with Sam. He had his own way, I had my own way, but I would end up being at work for way longer. I couldn't shut it off. And eventually I found myself exhausted. And when you're exhausted, that's how you get picked off, right? So my addiction started to arise. I remember going through this course in my recovery, and a lot of people don't know this, but in my recovery, where they talked about when anxiety levels are spiking, what we typically try to do is speed up to overcome this list. So for me, it was, honey, I can't make it home. I got so many things to do, and I'd be saying that stuff for my C tasks, even though the next day I might have my A tasks that are keeping me at work, and I have to definitely stay after work. And I would sell off everything to make sure that my anxiety could go down. And this person said to me, or this curriculum said to me, that the stage between anxiety and speeding up is the first stage of depression. And I was just like, I don't get depressed. I'm a person of faith, a Christian. I'm like, Christians don't get depressed. So, but I didn't realize how much it was impacting my life, these issues. For me, it was fear of failing, fear of insignificance. So can you speak about anxiety and depression and how you're seeing that in the marketplace? What can we do? So there's probably people listening that are employees of our clients, or even CEOs of our companies, or vendors, or whoever. What, if they're dealing with anxiety, or depression, what are the signs that they might be blind to it?
That's such a good question.
Because I was blind to it for a long time. And my wife will tell you, if she was here, she'd probably interject on a mic somewhere. But she would say, I told this guy so many times, you got to be home. You got to be more present with the kids. And there's a certain part of me that I feel like I had to go through that. I tell people, if you want to know how much you trust God, start a business, because it's gonna reveal the cracks inside of our lives. And whether you're a person of faith or not, that could lead into alcoholism, porn addiction, drugs, adultery. It's going to lead to that. And what I didn't even see the blind spots, but can you speak to what some of the blind spots could be in people's lives?
So think again, like supercomputer, we have firewalls, right? So think of all the pain and the sad that we don't want to deal with go behind a firewall, or the unconscious mind, right? And so we minimize all those browser windows, and I go, oh, I'm good, that didn't affect me. When in reality, shock denial is the first stage of grief for anything that's traumatic, painful, disappointing, hurtful. So all of us, me included, do not realize that we're hurt and we're sad and we're disappointed and angry about something.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm good. My mom passed away in 2020, and I was good, solidly good. Still teaching at the university, still CEO, still speaking and podcasting, everything for 6 months.
Wow.
And then a friend was like, we were working on a book project, and she's like, actually, I feel like we should talk about our hearts today. And I'm like, no, I'm a challenger. Let's get the thing done. Let's work, right? Any other leaders out there that you just want to be working? You don't want to stop and talk about your emotions? So I acquiesce. We talk about our emotions, and in 5 minutes, I am sobbing for the first time in 6 months, because my little minimized browser windows were running in the background, defending against everything that I didn't want to deal with and feel. Right? So the outside of the body is very similar. It gives a great allegory of the inside. So like the end of your hand, you have nerve endings. And so everything inside of us pulls away from pain. And so you'll move your hand away and go, oh, don't touch that hot thing. So then the reflex arc, the back part of the brain, very, very deep stem, then it's going to automatically do that without you having to think about it.
Wow.
But it also does that on the inside. So I have things that I don't want to think about, but I don't consciously decide to not think about it. I have a system that's automatically doing that for me, and it's called the defense mechanism. And so those are literal parts of the soul. I don't believe you literally have brick and mortar that's being built up. That means a literal part of our soul leaves the executive committee of the inner world, and that part of my soul is now going, nope, my role is now denial. I'm good. I'm fine. I got this.
Oh, yeah.
And that's that anxiety state, right?
Yes,
Where
yes.
hyper energy, I've got this, I'm good, I'm going to keep working, I'm going to defend against, I'm going to block awareness
Yep.
for myself, not others. It's actually for myself because I don't want to feel my own pain. I'm bristling away. And then we get really angry and upset when someone says, I think you're depressed. I think you're anxious. I think you've got an addiction
You
issue.
don't know what you're talking about.
No, I don't.
You don't know the pressures I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
You don't know the workload I have.
Exactly.
You're not in my shoes.
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
said all
man.
those things.
Yeah, we defend
all.
and we pull
Yeah,
away,
yeah.
and now we've got this inner world.
Yeah.
But the problem is a fragmented computer is not going to properly function. And so now I need an outside source to try to bring pleasure, structure, okayness. And that's where I work with tons of people. And my hope is to speak more in the public so that we can get ahead of a lot of these affairs and addictions and, you know, another CEO that crumbles and you're like, man, like that was really embarrassing and could have been prevented. Or a whole generation of kids that the latest statistic on emotional affairs, that kids are really, really angry about even the term work spouse. Because so many of them, their life is the result of parents having
Wow.
physical affairs and or work being an affair. And so they didn't get an on-hand parent because work was their life. And when we're defending against our pain, work is a fantastic excuse, for me included. And even I, as a clinical psychologist, don't know that my pain is there. And so it's not until we start glitching. And that's some of the symptoms. Many times if we don't pay attention to our soul, then before I know it, I'm having chest pains.
Yeah.
I might have tachycardia, which just means kind of irregular or fast, sped up heart rate. You might have mental fog, fatigue. Think of like if your computer is sluggish. I called Apple one time about my computer for help.
You should call us.
And I should have. I should have. And the guy was like, ma'am, your hard drive is from 2008. Like, this is ancient.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it should even be working at this point.
Amazing.
And I felt like that parallel, that
That's
we
amazing.
upgrade our software. We know the right things. I mean, if you're in this world at all, you know a lot about mental health. But that doesn't translate into upgrading my hard drive. And that's the part where if we're not paying attention to our soul, our physical health and our relationships and our isolation behavior of how much we show the world, hey, I'm good, I'm the life of the party. And then on the inside, drinking to cut the edge off, taking pain pills, doing different things, scrolling through social media or porn late at night to just try to get everything to calm back down, which again is trying to get the pain back inside instead of honoring and releasing and then rebooting the computer.
It is such a, I mean, it's such a hidden thing. Like it could be such a hidden thing. I think a lot of us like can just live in that place. Nobody knows it. I mean, you do see it. Like, I think like, I know that if I don't get enough sleep, I mean, the risks are there
Yep.
for possibly, you know, falling into sin or whatever it is. Even not spending enough time spiritually.
Yeah.
But it's such a hidden thing. So for the people who are struggling with that stuff or having a hard time even believing that they're struggling with it,
Yeah.
what can they do? Like what would be like the first next step? Is there like an assessment out there, or like what advice would you give them? And by the way, this is not like clinical advice, just heads up.
Yeah.
This is just
Yeah, we'll
advice
have to get
from
it.
a friend.
General, yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that you asked the question because, again, we kind of lie to ourselves, me included, and we're not actually really good at assessing our own mental health
Right.
or relationship skills. So I do have an assessment on drshannancrawford.com, and you can take an assessment and start identifying, okay, what area am I winning at? And then what area am I not winning at? And so having something objective outside of you really is helpful. Getting a 360, asking people to give genuine feedback. And that's been really helpful with a lot of the executives that I work with, is getting a blind 360 and then getting that feedback and aggregating it and saying, hey, are you aware of this? Because everybody says, we're good, we're fine. As long as there's not a problem and nobody's saying anything at work or at home, we're okay.
Right.
And that doesn't actually mean that. They might just be avoiding the fight and the conversation because I'm tired and I don't want to go there. And so I'm just trying to keep the peace, buddy or gal. And so that's where getting feedback really is helpful. And paying attention to the areas where you just want to escape. What first was enjoyable, like the dreaming phase of being an entrepreneur, is so surreal. There's nothing like
phase.
it. Yes.
Yes, okay.
Where it's actually about the dream. And then entrepreneurs that are meant to go plow, and now they have to manage.
Yes.
Now they have to stay and deal with hard things and complicated and be glorified managers. Yeah.
Don't you wish?
That I wish, right?
Clock out.
All times.
I would like to leverage some of my PTO time.
That's right. Don't call me on vacation. That never happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We have a lot of those emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
It's real. So if I'm not aware of that, I'm actually in a totally different trajectory of that entrepreneurial scaling. And so my inner world is having to navigate that. And many times the thing that makes an entrepreneur successful is that diligence, that perspective, go after the goal, but yet we're neglecting our health. We're neglecting our spirituality, our family, our relationships. All the other areas are neglected because I am so singularly focused about this that then once the time you arrive or you sell out, like exit your company, you get a big payout, the research says your depression is the highest right after that moment because I've put my hope in that. And so my business is my baby, it's my hope. And now what do I do with my life? I have loss of purpose, identity, and I've neglected everything in my life. And so your adrenals, which helps the cortisol, which helps you do the things, those are bottomed out. And so people's depression and suicidality are the highest right after a pinnacle moment because you realize it's empty if you don't have life and joy and purpose in your life beyond just that entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah. So interesting you say that. I have a friend that is in, he just exited. It's like the dream, like an exit, a large exit, made all this money. And I was just talking with my dad, and he was telling me about this, about our friend that is now doing therapy and things like that, because all the power he had, he no longer has anymore.
Right.
They don't even call him from that office anymore because he's moved on, And so it's interesting. You say, well, I have a question, Dr. Crawford. In this case, what's coming to my mind here is like we do physicals, like if you will, with a doctor once a year, or you have those things that you're doing is that what you're seeing? What are you seeing today when you talk about rebooting your hard drive and all these kinds of things? Like, are you seeing people set up? I mean, even if you have no issue, I'm just going to go and do a mental health checkup once a year at least, or what's happening right now? I guess.
Yeah. I think it's probably 50-50. I think there's more of an awareness and reduced stigma. Especially in younger people, there's like, oh, here's my therapist. Everybody, like it's culturally really normal and sanctioned. Like, yes, this is great. Older tends to have a harder time, still kind of carry some of that stigma. And we only go to therapy or marriage counseling when there's a real issue and the wheels are falling off the bus. But in our field, we actually really wish people would be proactive. Just like heart disease, that you can have a problem early on that can be prevented. Right? We don't have to wait until things are at the point that you're like, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live with these people. I don't want this company. I'm over it all. We don't want to get to that place. So there are some people that I think so. And like the more that I think kind of like an evangelist for mental health, like the more we're getting out there in society, I think people are becoming more proactive. But unfortunately, the majority of people go, I don't have time for that.
What does proactive look like? I mean, does it truly work to just come show up once a year or something like that? Or is it like, hey, you need to do, I don't know, what does it look like to be proactive in mental health, I guess?
Well, I would say, honestly, the waiting list for most good therapists, it's usually 3 or more months to get in.
Wow.
Okay.
So to start doing research early and know who do I fit with, who specializes in kind of my niche that I feel can resonate with me, that I can already establish a relationship preventatively, proactively, and there's always enrichment. There's positive psychology that you can go optimal. Not everything has to be like, tell me about your childhood, right?
Yeah.
Like the stereotype. But you can meet with an enrichment-based or positive-based psychologist and move in that direction preventatively. So I think having that is great. Being in groups or communities, small groups where you talk relationally, that you have even accountability or a friend that you're like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Having regular practices of journaling, mindfulness, processing and defragmenting the computer internally. All of those are things we could start implementing proactively, and it would make a big difference.
Those are all the things my dad would say are touchy-feely, but
Yeah.
we got to do it now.
Touchy-feely. Well, in my case, I did like a year-long program where I had to meet with a group of guys, and we met on a regular basis. We journaled, we answered questions, we called each other. It was the best time ever.
Yeah.
Like, I got to admit, like, so if you're in a place of this kind of denial,
Yeah.
like, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel oftentimes.
Yeah.
So when I think about like that season of my life, I remember reading an article of yours, and you said something that was really profound. You said, I knew what I had to do, but I didn't really know how to apply it. And this is in your journey, and we'll get into that in a bit. But I that was me too. Like, I knew what I had to do,
Yeah.
but I felt really stuck. Like, I really felt like I couldn't shake this thing. And workaholism, it just consumed me. Now, I love to work. I really enjoy working. That's actually like probably not a good thing for workaholism, right? But I just realized it typically stems from somewhere. For me, I'm like, how can I trade time with my kids and my wife on something that is work, right? And although we are serving our customers and taking care of them, like, so the denial is so thick, and it's really crazy, like really wild. So the clients that you meet with, I'm assuming, because I heard you speak about this, you got CEOs that are meeting with you on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Are you doing that? Is that primarily who you're meeting with? Leaders?
Yeah, I still have a practice where I see some just traditional therapy,
Right.
but the majority of people that gravitate toward me tend to be influencers, leaders, CEOs, and their executive team.
Ah, that's amazing. Okay, let's pivot a little bit.
Great.
You know, what's really cool about you is that you are a leadership performance psychologist,
Yeah,
but at the same time, you are an entrepreneur.
absolutely.
Like, you're truly, like, it's like you come into these shows and everybody's talking to you about psychology. We're going to talk about business a little bit, because I think it'd be really cool to hear your perspective. And I know we know the pressures of business. What was really interesting is that you've had multiple businesses. I read that you sold jewelry. Okay. I read that you published a magazine. And I read that you used to repurpose chandelier pieces or something like that.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, you really read. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. Where did this entrepreneurship, passion or drive come from?
Yeah, I love it. That's such a great question. So I really believe in family legacy, right? And family modeling and the good things, right? Psychology can talk about all the bad things, but I really love talking about the beautiful things that we inherit from family and culture as well. So my grandpa was part of that Grapes of Wrath, Oklahoma, Dust Bowl farmers, and they had to migrate to California. And so he was undiagnosed dyslexic and no education, because back then, farmer kids, you're just a part of the employee staff, and you don't go to school because you don't have money and time for that. And so he came to California and had to get job skills with no education, no training. All he knew how to do was farm.
Yeah.
And so this became part of our family mantra. He would go to a job site and they'd say, can you run this forklift? And he'd be like, I can do that. Of course, he didn't know how, and they'd figure that out and he'd get fired. And then he'd go to the next job site and they'd say, can you run this bulldozer? I can do that. Right? So he was declaring, I believe I'm capable. I have no job skill training or capability of any way,
great.
but I believe that I can. And so we have a whole family of dyslexic, which usually means you're visionary and innovative, by the way. So my dad then grows up, also undiagnosed dyslexic, really good at sports and really good at building, and so didn't even finish high school. and went into building with his dad, making tons of money, young man, being a foreman, went into construction, all these things. And then he met my mom at a specific college, and then they started their family, and they've been entrepreneurs ever since. And so I love just the family of origin that I came from, that I've never experienced being an employee. Right? I've never been an employee. My parents have never been. I'm sure they have been, but in my lifetime.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I've been an employee, but like that mindset.
The mindset. Yeah.
I did not grow up with that. I've never heard my family go, oh, that boss, they won't give me time off, or they're treating me unfairly. I've never heard that victim narrative of being an employee. I've only heard, okay, we've got payroll. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Let's plan and strategize. And my parents were co-CEOs. And so they ran this thriving multi-prong. It was building, windows, insulation. They had installation as well as sales. And so they had all these layers. And then they went into investment. And my dad did go back into building at some point. So the only culture I'm aware of is being an entrepreneur and being like, well, I'll try that next, right? And so my childhood, the belief that I had is if you're not falling, you're not getting better. If you're not failing, you're not improving. And so that was just part of how I grew up. And I've always struggled academically. I was in tutoring my whole life. And so I'm used to having to work really hard to achieve a goal. And the research says people who get a C average, but they worked for it, usually perform better in life because you're used to the grit, the gut.
I was a C student. There you go.
Exactly. And so that's where I'm super grateful for my family inheritance of just being third generation entrepreneur, and not always glamorous, right? Like I also saw the days where California was in a recession and they're having to like navigate that, and then investing in Texas during different points. And so that's where, when I was very young, I actually started my business. I finished grad school at 26. And then, so I got my doctorate at 26, and then I started my business at 29. And so went after it. And I had parents that were like, you can fail, but at least you try, give it a shot. And so then I've been a business ever since.
So how did that transition into what you're doing today?
That was my
You're an
first
entrepreneur,
business.
but you're now helping people.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from, that passion?
Absolutely. So your earliest stories, those are when I was a child, for the audience. Those are my childhood earliest memories. I was always in business. So I would walk around the house and be like the imaginary clients. This is our resort. Great. This is where you'll get your facilities for exercise. It'd be our trampoline with weeds growing in it. I just had this imagination. Or my dad in construction early on, we didn't have money. And so the best toy he could give me at that time was these broken chandelier pieces.
Oh, that's great.
And there was the 1989 earthquake, and my mom's running down the hall to come get me and make sure I'm safe. And I have this vivid memory that I'm really trying to make sure I get a good deal on this chandelier piece for my imaginary customer to make sure that,
It was in you.
So those are
man,
my earliest
great.
memories were always entrepreneurial and starting my little magazine. But I went to grad school to be a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what my first business is Dr. Crawford and Associates, which we rebranded to Crawford Clinics. And I've been doing that ever since. Okay.
So what I've come to learn and love about you is that you truly lived out your teachings. I want to read something, and I'd love to get your input on it. There's a certain time where you said, then I started experiencing depression, self-harm, self-esteem issues, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix it. My original joy, creativity, boldness, and hope were replaced by heavy depression, insecurity, self-hatred, and self-sabotage. How did you overcome that? Where was this coming from inside of you? You don't have to answer all of that, but truly, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So for me, I knew my life purpose at 5. And then after that, it was almost like my life went dark. And I was still imaginative and fun and friendly, but I just had such a dark depression from that day forward, probably 6 on. And so then I'm in college pursuing to be an actress. And while I'm there, I just noticed, man, these self-esteem issues, self-hatred, self-sabotage, self-harm, eating disorders, these things are not getting better. And so I went to a counselor at the University Counseling Center, and she said, well, first appointment, tell me about your childhood. And at that point, I said, I actually don't really remember a lot of it. I have a good family. I just don't have a lot of memories. And she's rolling her eyes saying, why don't you come back when you're not being resistant? And that was my first impression of mental health and psychology as an acting major with platinum blonde hair and gold eyelashes. I'm like, psychology is the stupidest profession. Yeah, I literally made a vow and a judgment. I was like, I would never be a psychologist.
Oh, man.
Ironically, I don't think she was a psychologist. I think she was a counselor, but there's a difference. So without her trauma training, which I later learned, I went to someone else and she said, well, let's pray and see if there's a reason. And so when we prayed, then these trauma memories started coming back at age 6. And so from that point on, my computer had been containing trauma. And so my inner world was glitching. And I didn't know that because it was like having a malignant cancer inside of your soul. But yet I look fine, I'm functioning on the outside, and nobody can tell all of that pain.
Exactly.
Because like we talked about, I didn't even want to know. Like I had
Denial.
repressed that unconsciously and didn't know. So when the memories came back, I felt this leap in my heart, like, oh my gosh, I've been pursuing acting up to this point, and now I want to help other people. Because I know that all the willpower in the world, all the mental exercises and effort and mantras cannot adjust a broken hard drive. And so then that directed me. And then I had really good mentors that were like, you can't do anything with a bachelor's in psychology, get your doctorate. And I'm like, okay. And so I go spend the next 10 years of my life getting a very large degree. And then I did psychoanalysis postdoctoral fellowship, which just means committing a lot more time and effort into understanding the psychological makeup. And so that was that journey. And along the way, I've been doing my own work. And so it's fun. It's now I enjoy being in my own skin. Even my little wrinkles, even my gray hair, all the things that are starting to happen with age. I'm like, I enjoy me.
That's so
And
good.
I used to literally loathe and hate myself. I would rock back and forth with self-hatred. That's how depressed and toxic my mental health was. And now this journey, which I don't want to go into all the details, but it's just been really beautiful to love who I am. And then out of that abundance, I can't help but love the people around me.
That's
I love it.
awesome. Yeah,
I love it.
that's great.
What's a realistic expectation that people need to have going through these traumas? Like, how long is it going to take to go through? So I've heard stories of it happening really fast. I feel like I'm still on the journey, like even though I've been in it for about 5 years, and kind of always discovering things and working through stuff with the people in my life who've affected me. What's like anybody that's hasn't even dealt with those traumas, like what should they expect? Like, is it a quick thing? Be patient about, like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think the brilliant part of our psychological makeup is each person truly is genetically, culturally, spiritually, relationally, so nuanced. Every person is really, truly unique. And so our wounds are not the same. So 10 people having depression, while the diagnosis is the same, the actual underlying of why could be a vast array of a million different things. Like, I didn't go into session going, hey, can you help me with my childhood trauma? I went in going, I'm a college student. I don't know why I hate myself and I keep making bad choices and, you know, I hate this. And so most people don't know what's below the waterline. And really, I think that's the reason we don't go to therapy.
Yeah.
Because unconsciously, some part of me does know that there might be something. And so I love the Shakespearean quote, he who protesteth too much. When my clients spend a lot of time telling me, I don't deal with that, that's not an issue for me. And they like bow up a little bit and I'm like, oh, okay. That's interesting that there's so much energy to make sure I know that that's not an issue versus someone being like, I don't know. I haven't explored that. I haven't thought of that. That energy feels really different. So again, 10 people could have totally different reasons. So one person, it might just be, man, I'm in burnout. I've overused my adrenals and my neurochemical system needs to be reset. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we're better. Other people, it could be really profound, deep mindsets and core beliefs. We've created, I've created Restoring Self-Cohesion, and it's a model of therapy that our whole team uses at Crawford Clinics, and we're getting ready to do trainings for other therapists so they can know how to streamline that process of knowing, okay, are we dealing with a body issue, a soul issue, or a spirit issue, and then how do we restore alignment? So whether it's extreme, some people have had human trafficking and they may not know, like trauma and all kinds of programming can make that very suppressed versus other people, they felt unloved because of a parent who overworked. And the symptoms can look the same on the outside, but the amount of what needs to be done on the inside completely vastly different. And so that's why we've created this to streamline and assess for those layers.
I have a question from one of our team members.
Great.
Okay, so we know that our brain has the capacity to change, and our thoughts can influence this change. What, in your perspective, are the most effective ways to overcoming dysfunctional habits?
So part of what we do in the Restoring Self-Cohesion is called an internal board meeting. And so internally, just like you have lots of organs that have to work together in your physical body, we also have lots of parts of our soul, lots of parts of our spirit. And so with each of these facets, I have to now figure out what role is that serving? What function is this behavior or this belief? Because it was developed at one point where it was adaptive, right? And then now I'm an adult and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why do I do that? So for me, when I had self-hatred and self-harm, I was expressing anger, which is a stage of grief, but I was turning against self instead of acting out because it was protecting my relationships and I didn't want anyone to not like me. And so I would act out against self and I would hate self instead of actually honoring and vocalizing what had happened with other people, right? So that was actually defending and protecting relationships by acting against self. I didn't know that at the time. I just felt like, what is wrong with me? You know, and I had tried all the behavior modification and mindset, but the impulse was still there until I realized, oh, this is a protector part of me. This is a precious part of my soul that's actually trying to help. But it's outdated, it's antiquated.
Coping.
Yeah, it was the best way my soul knew how to steward that amount of trauma. Or like eating disorders. A lot of people, male and female, have eating disorders, right? Even comfort eating, right? Going through the fridge, even after dinner, kind of like mindlessly eating. A lot of times we're self-medicating. And so we're changing behavior systems internally, and we're just trying to have a diet. We're trying to be nutritious without realizing, oh, I'm seeking comfort. I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed. I don't know how to process what happened today or what I saw in the news or what my spouse may have said. And so we're medicating things, and there's actually a drive, and we have to learn how to honor the original need that that behavior or belief served, and then visualize it like it's a literal part of you. Like you're having a conversation and saying, hey, I want to thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me. Temper, you know, a lot of people hate their anger. And I have my clients say, thank you, temper. Thank you for trying to protect me from when I felt small, inferior, and inadequate around my dad. And now that made me feel big and brave.
Wow.
I don't need that anymore because I'm not 6, I'm not 10, I'm not 12. I now can step inside and be adult size. I know that's metaphorical and abstract, but the more that we can honor and work with our system rather than against, trying to say, stop it, don't do that anymore. Behavior modification, you're splitting the inner world rather than learning how to bring cohesion and help all the parts of self come back into their original design in the inner committee.
That is so powerful.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What you got, Sammy?
Well, yeah, let's we're going to shift one more time.
I'll grab some
and
water
I think
real
like
quick.
towards, you know, I'll just say on the technology side of things, where Shetty and I work, you know, one thing we're realizing, obviously supporting our clients, doing all things are important, but internally in our team, our marriages are like, you know, I mean, we all have different experiences, different walks. But it's just such a journey to try to, you know, it's like, I know I could speak from experience that it takes work to keep a marriage happy and moving forward. Honeymoon phases don't last in a way, and you got to really put the effort in.
Yeah.
And so love to shift to the topic of marriage and just kind of get your opinion. Again, like I think we should put the disclaimer out. This is just us conversating. So no advice here that is like, you know, let's call it clinically given, but just us talking. Love to just kind of answer some questions and get your opinions on some of those things because, you know, Shadi, if you want to share, or I could share the story of like our marriage conference. I think that's important to give some context.
Sure. Last year, we had the chance to take some employees to a marriage conference. It's actually something we've been thinking about doing and how to not just impact our employees professionally, but also maritally, financially, spiritually, those things, right? Which is awesome. And it's so interesting. It's something that like my wife and I needed to do anyways, right? So like, let's go to a marriage conference. We need to do it. And then let's just bring a whole bunch of people with us. We brought a whole bunch of staff with us. Second day into the marriage conference, we sat down at a steakhouse and we had these cards, these marriage cards. And on the marriage cards, there was this question like, okay, what made you fall in love with your spouse? And we would take that card, I would read it, I'd answer the question, I'd pass it to somebody else, they'd read it, answer the question, then grab their card and do the same thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the first card, one couple starts crying and saying how much we needed this in our marriage. Another couple starts crying. By the end of it, 80% of the couples at the table were crying.
Yeah.
And there was an immediate smack in the face of, whoa, like I spend so much time with these people, but I have no clue what's happening in their personal lives. The amount of release that occurred in that one setting in the marriage conference, really blessed Ange and I, because we really had the chance to share our story and our struggle and how we survived almost separating and going through our struggles. At the same time, we impacted these people's lives. Their lives are changed forever. And then we impacted the culture of our company.
Yeah.
All in one setting. And it was easy, right? So if you look at the whole entire year, we did a killer Christmas party. Why don't you share that part?
Yeah, I think so we had a good year last year, and we try to really take care of our employees, whether it's, employee lunches, buying gifts. So last year for Christmas, we really wanted to do a really good Christmas party for them, and we rented a place, and we got presents and awards, and we honored people and all those things like that. But I think still the most effective thing we did was from what they said was marriage conference. I got notes from people of saying thank you, for the marriage. I wouldn't say they couldn't care less about the Christmas party. I think everybody enjoyed it, but it was really impactful. And that's kind of what, I think is important as a business owner is, our team, in a lot of ways, as we start to grow, our team is, when it was Shaddy and I, we could control a lot of aspects because it was him and I doing it.
Yep.
But then you start to get your team in there. And so really keeping them motivated and, healthy and all those things is beneficial to the business. And so that's why we look at it in that way of not only that, but we want them to be happy in general, just because we're humans and we want them to be happy. So anyways, all that is preface is we just love to ask you some questions. And these are some that we found, and I've asked some people here at the office and just in general. But just to kind of start off, and I know you deal with marriages in your practice, what is some of the most common challenges that you see married couples face today?
Yeah. So I think without realizing it, most things in marriage come down to expectations. And so we have a unconscious belief that this person should meet all my needs, understand me, always advocate for me, always be in my corner, and you should be my biggest cheerleader and support. The hard thing is we have a rule book internally, metaphorically, that this person is supposed to live up to, and they're supposed to just intuitively know that if they love me. If they don't, then now I know you don't love me. And the research says 2.5 to 5 years within every committed relationship, including employees as well as marriage, that if you spend enough face time with somebody, eventually they're going to start tap dancing on your issues, right? So all the stuff that the little buried, minimized browser windows, I don't even know are down there. Eventually you spend enough time with somebody and they're going to do or say something that's going to hit one of those browser windows and it pops up. And now I look at your face and I associate this feeling with you. And so now I believe you're the one that's causing me to feel like that. And without realizing it, those are old templates. Those are dynamics from our past that then get replicated and projected. Projected is just that fancy word for I'm seeing you through a certain lens. Mm-hmm. But if I tell you that's what's happening, no, it's not, blah, 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 you're doing it, right? Because he who protesteth too much usually is a sign that you're actually dealing with a defense mechanism. So it's called a reenactment, where eventually you spend enough time, you'll hook somebody into a dynamic. If you have a belief that somebody, like an unresolved relationship with a mother that was not emotionally available or something, eventually you're going to see either male or female, actually does not matter, but you're going to see them as emotionally unavailable and not concerned and not caring enough. you're going to do or say something that will probably also elicit them doing that, right? I'm constantly disappointed that you're not doing more, rather than kind of like that exercise of saying, here's what I like about you. And when we have pain, we focus on pain because pain helps us survive, right? And so I focus on the bear is chasing me, I run away. I don't look at the pretty birds when the bear is chasing me. Yeah. I focus on pain. And so if you're making me feel pain, then now I have the right to be upset and to want to fix and resolve that until I stop. And that's danger, because with Gottman's research, that means that apocalypse in his research of really just stepping away and stop trying. That's one of the most dangerous, where you're not fighting. You're not disagreeing. You're not having some level of energy to try to be on the same page. To just give up and stop trying is one of the most dangerous signs in a relationship, because I have a bias, confirmation bias, that you're not going to listen. You don't care. Wow. And so when that happens, everything you do gets perceived through that belief system. And now that template, I'm perceiving you through a faulty filter, and then I'll treat you as if it's true, and then you'll respond as if it's true, and that's a reenactment, where we're actually replaying some of our past dynamics because that was modeled. That's what's familiar, and that's what my brain anticipates and then plays out in the relationship.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
That's pretty good. So would you say on that topic, like, is it better to just, I mean, if we're trying to like breed the nature of, I think we're all, human, and, some of those kind of, let's call it negative connotations can come out, and you don't live up to this, or you're always disappointing me in this. But just to kind of get to that point, is it just always speak positive? Is that kind of the advice about, your spouse or whatever it is, like, or try to as much as possible? Or
that frightens me.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not actual intimacy.
Okay.
So then you become roommates who are having this 2-inch relationship where it's like, thanks for washing the dishes, and now I'm going to go to the other room because we don't actually have a deep relationship. Like, it's behavior modification.
Yeah.
Do I think positive is absolutely important? Yes. But that would only be software.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if I'm not doing hard drive of also going, I got really annoyed and frustrated at this person. Instead of just assuming that face is what caused this feeling, if I would step back and just do a level of journaling, and this is called the psychodynamic triangle. If you're at the top of a triangle that you write on a piece of paper, easy, you just write what was the situation. On the right side of the triangle, you write out what thoughts, feelings, emotions came up. What was my knee-jerk reaction? The more at the gut level, the better it is. And so let's say you had a conversation and walked away annoyed and like, I feel very not listened to. And so you write that down. I feel disrespected. I feel small. I feel frustrated. I feel invisible. I feel unwanted. Whatever you write down on the right. And then in the left, unrelated to the top, you say, what other times throughout my entire life have I felt even remotely similar? And so now you're actually taking responsibility to do your own hard drive upgrade.
Incredible. Yeah.
To say, what other times have I felt like that when my ex did this, when my dad or my mom or my siblings or whatever? What happened that made that feeling? One situation, a guy was told not to hit girls or yell at girls on the playground. Something so benign. But as a girl was a bully to him as a kid, he just kind of festered and he made an inner vow, I will never let another girl disrespect me like that. Right? Mm-hmm. And so now, 30 years later, he's never thought about that moment a day in his life until therapy. And we go, oh, I get really angry when I feel misunderstood or bullied by my wife, who is literally 90 pounds. She's not bullying him, but he feels bullied in that moment. And so that's his trigger. And so then he bows up, reminding of that person's parent. And so now they're in a reenactment. So I would say, yes, speak positive, software. But also hard drive is going, okay, I'm responsible for me. If I'm having this big reaction, then I know probably something is also getting triggered and bringing up more ammunition than just this moment. And I need to start processing that. And then you can have heartful dialogue and conversation to reunite versus just leaving everything dormant.
Gotcha. That's great. Here's another one. How can I deal with stress and conflict in a healthy way, especially when arguments arise with my spouse?
So Gottman research, again, they put couples in labs and they put little meters on them to register their blood pressure. And they found that if your blood pressure gets over a certain amount of, that moment where you're clenching your jaw and you
Yeah.
feel annoyed and you're rolling your eyes, even though you're an adult and you know you shouldn't, but you're like,
I never do that.
and you're trying to bite your tongue, that means you should walk away. Not from the relationship in general, unilaterally, but just you really do have to calm your central nervous system.
Yeah,
We
it's
have
so
a
good.
brake and we have a go pedal, right? We have the accelerator and the brake. And so the brake is the parasympathetic nervous system, and it calms everything back down. And when that's calm, I can hear you and emotionally relate and empathize. If the accelerator is on, which is sympathetic nervous system, all that hijacking of the back of the brain, I don't not only not empathize, I see you as the aggressor and you're my problem. And I have to get you to agree or to shut up so that I don't have to listen to this anymore. It's producing a ton of stress inside people's bodies. So the worst thing to do is to continue to allow your mouth to spew terrible, fearful aggression and anxiety and insecurity and projections and cruel things, because it feels justified when I have a fire alarm going off, going, this person is a threat. They're causing me stress. They're not understanding. They're disrespecting me.
Disrespect, yeah.
You're
Guys don't want to
doing
get
this.
disrespected.
That's right.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Yes. And she doesn't want to feel not cherished.
Yeah, it's not loved. Yeah.
Yeah. And so on the inside, that fire alarm is saying, this is justified. They need to hear this because you're hurting me, you're disrespecting me, or not loving me. The worst thing to do is just to continue to barrage. Now, it's hard because most of the time you have the pursuer and you have the distancer. But if you can have ground rules and say, baby, I love you enough to take a break, to go play basketball, to go on a hike, to go journal, to do
Go to Brahms.
weights, go to Brahms, do something to step away from the situation, because it's like seeing red. You know, this part of the brain is not
It
wise.
feels impossible sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're just in it. Like, let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's the moments I think you say the things that you would not normally
never.
say, right?
Yeah.
It's a battle.
Yeah. It's like defense mechanism comes up and it's
Yes.
like, I don't really mean it, but what are you saying about me? I got to say something even.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
So the worst thing to do is keep going. The best thing to do is whoever calls the break is the same one that says, let's circle back in an hour. Let's circle back before bed. That we don't just create a culture of sweep it under the rug and we don't ever talk about it, because then we just become very lonely roommates. But if instead we come back and go, okay, I have been working on myself. I've been journaling, processing, talked to a friend, accountability. I had some prayer time. I did something active during that time, not just continuing to ruminate, which a lot of people do. They step away, but then they're still kind of filling in what they should have said and
4
how
or 5
they were.
days later, you're still
Yes.
angry. Like, let it go. I'm like, I forgot. What's going on? What are you talking about?
It's still coming up. It's still coming up. But if you're using that time productively, and I'm upgrading my own hard drive, going, okay, I feel, and depending on personality, male and female, some are more aggression, right? And some are more soft and depressed. So fear or sad and anger are actually the same emotion, just flip of the same coin. So as sad and emotional and needy and desperate as one person, they're also angry on the inside. And as angry and bowed up and pissed off a guy might be or a girl might be, they're equally sad and hurt and disrespected on the inside. So it's the same emotion. It's just depending on personality and family of origin of what we allow to express and what we bury. So when I can access the vulnerable side and say, hey, in that moment, I know it wasn't your heart. And that's the key. We really have to get away from you are doing this, mind reading, into, hey, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to hope all things good. I'm going to believe what's best about you, that you weren't intending to do that, but a byproduct of that interaction left me feeling this. And I'm bringing my vulnerability to you to help reconstruct our relationship, not destroy you as the villain who just hurt me. That way, both people, and there's it's called Hope Focused Couples Counseling, has really good protocols on how to just do this work. And there's books, there's therapists, there's all kinds of resources out there. There's a million others. That's just the one off the top of my head of really starting to dive into lowering those defense mechanisms, stop saying you are doing something, and saying, hey, this is my experience, even though I know that's not your heart. In that moment, you might have to say it by faith because it feels true that it was intentional.
You know, I there's not a couple that's watching this, a person who's married who's watching this, that thinks their marriage is perfect, right? It's just like, it's not true. If you are, you're in denial.
I want to
okay?
meet that person.
I want to meet that person. Please teach me. But can we demystify what couples counseling is? Because for somebody like, especially if you're an immigrant, like we're both immigrants, so it's easy to just be like, I don't need it, I'm good. But somebody who's listening to this is like, man, I'm struggling, or I need this, or we're struggling with communication. Like 5 kids, 16 years married. It's so easy to see that couples drift apart and like the kids leave the nest. And you're like, I don't know this person anymore.
Exactly.
You got to work so hard on it. But can we demystify what counseling looks like?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
To be licensed, I have to do continuing education. Many professions, it's required. We have to go through school before we're allowed to drive a car. We have to go through a learning curve for every area of life except marriage and parenting. It's the only area that it's not mandatory in life that you stay abreast of what's going on in your industry and your culture.
Yeah, interesting.
That's so interesting. Yeah,
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that's very.
And yet, it costs the most in divorce, in family litigation. It costs the most in emotional and psychological threat and danger and what that does to the children.
Generational, yeah.
Absolutely. It costs the most. And yet, as a society, we have not normalized prevention, education, having even pre-engagement counseling would be a trend that we're trying to encourage, that before the wedding invitations and the dress and all the social pressure that you're like, hey, are you guys even compatible? Like, is this even just like lust, or like, are you really a good fit?
Who says that, right? You typically are like, we're so happy for you. And let's go.
right.
Nobody challenges them based on some parameters or something. Yeah.
Yeah, as a society, we don't do that in any culture, I don't think. And so the more that we could say societally, why would you not invest in your mental health, in your marriage, and in your parenting as your primary focus of what you would spend money, time, and energy on? And yet every single person says, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, marriage and parenting. I mean, those two alone.
I mean, it's like health, like too, right? Like, I mean, yeah, you want to take care of your body. And marriage is part of taking care of your body for sure. So, yeah, it's so interesting.
That's so
to see
good.
that.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add on this?
No, I think that, I mean, there's so much more.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, I think we covered a lot.
I want to do some quick hit questions.
Great, let's
Okay.
do it.
What's your favorite quote and why?
So I thought about that. I think my favorite quote is, this too shall pass. My mom would say it to me my whole childhood.
Wow.
This too shall pass. And so it just puts things in perspective. This might suck right now. It might be the worst day or breakup or life, financial or business moment. This will pass. And it just kind of normalizes, and I can always hear her voice in my head saying it.
What's your greatest joy in running your company?
I think replicating myself, right? Like
It's a dream.
living for yourself is empty. It's a
Yes.
void. But if I can now say what I do, and now you put your own flair on it and getting to replicate and create a
Wow.
team, and we can have a larger impact on society, and then going out and being in culture, being in the world, getting to see clients tomorrow morning and then be on a podcast today and speak for a conference tomorrow. Like, that's so enriching to have the freedom of being in this industry long enough that now I get to be in many lanes and then have direct contact with my team that they get to now carry it forward.
You are doing some amazing stuff. Okay, what's your greatest struggle in running your company?
Squirrel.
Oh, she hit it. Man, that's
Right on
us
point,
too.
yeah.
Squirrel, what? Did you ask me a question?
What's this idea? Oh, yes, we have a little bit of money. Let's go. We did that.
So
big
guilty.
time.
Yeah, I think the curse and blessing of all visionaries is I have so much vision. I have a binder. I have a massive binder where I've written with tabs every one of my dreams. It's pretty obscene
You should sell that.
and awesome.
You're like a vision. Yeah, man, that's amazing.
So I think it's the squirrel. Actually complete things is something I'm working on, but I like the book Rocket Fuel. So we've been
Yeah.
building the team to get the integrator person so that I can stay in the vision and enjoy that.
You're doing EOS. You're doing the Rocket Fuel EOS, all that stuff.
No,
Traction?
I just did the book.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that what you mean?
That is,
You're pretty much.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
trying.
So you may have already answered this, but I'll just ask it. What are you currently looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I am really looking forward to writing both Restoring Self-Cohesion, the literal psychology book,
Yes.
but most importantly, the fiction trilogy allegory book that we're going to have espionage and romance depict an inner world in conflict. And so kind of like the book Chronicles of Narnia that became a film and it became kind of a cult following.
Yep.
I can't wait. Even my clients who have told the concepts, they're like, oh my gosh, my Scarlet is taking over right now. Or I am having a Chloe moment, right? So I've named my characters based on psychological constructs. And so for us to have in culture and hopefully in education, in marriage, conferences, curriculum growing up, that this is a normal part of understanding our inner world through allegory. So
I
that
can't
would
wait
be
to see that.
what I'm excited about.
Movie one day?
Yeah, trilogy.
God.
I've also been told maybe make it into a Netflix series because we could develop our characters more.
You gotta do it.
So we'll see.
Awesome. Okay, what would the Shannan of today, Dr. Crawford today, tell the younger Dr. Crawford?
You will get through this.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, everything felt really high stakes, high perfectionism, don't fail, And so just the normalizing of you'll get through this and you're on time.
We didn't get to touch on this, but it's so true. Like the 20s, you just feel like you're going to miss it.
Yep.
You just feel like, I'm failing. I see other friends succeeding more than me.
Yeah.
You get to the 30s, you start realizing everybody's the same. And then, it's just the reality. It's just this false realities, really. All right, last question. If you can give one piece of advice for someone that's struggling right now with mental health, what would it be?
You're not alone and you don't have to do it alone. There is hope and there's lots of options. Wherever you are, there are mental health therapists, there's pastoral counseling, there's groups, there's support groups, online, in person, wherever you live, there is access. And you don't have to gut through it. There is a lot of hope and there's a lot of research about the things that can help whatever you're specifically going through.
Dr. Shannan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And guys, thank you for watching this episode. If this touched your life, if it impacted you like it did for us, please like, subscribe, comment. Stay in touch, reach out to us, and you don't have to go about this alone for sure.
And also, don't forget to mention Dr. Crawford's podcast, too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Unlock You. Absolutely. Why don't you share a little bit about it really quick?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Unlock You because I'm not anymore, but I was an adjunct professor for many years. So we did it like university with Dr. Shannan Crawford. And so just helping people optimize. Everything I do is always on a positive psychology bent. And so optimizing mental health, relationship, vocation, and spirituality.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.